board is fractured. The rules no longer hold. The story makes no sense. That's where we left off. The game is broken, and powerful forces are rewriting it under our feet. So the question now is simple and brutal. How do you play when the game itself is collapsing? Some say focus on the individual. Get your life in order. Clean your room. Live with integrity. Others turn to collective myths and movements, religion, ideology, and politics for stability in numbers. Some turn to new practices of meaning, or to science and technology to push death back. Each has real value. None is sufficient. No single strategy can win a game when the rules themselves are unstable. That's why I want to talk about resilience. There are many proposals for dealing with the meaning crisis, some more sophisticated than others, and most have at least partial value. Jordan Peterson offers an individual-first approach grounded in psychology and mythology. Order your life, tell the truth, speak precisely, take care of yourself like a person you're responsible for. That kind of advice is genuinely helpful because it helps us avoid the regrettable. But the dangers ahead are larger than personal virtue versus corruption. Individual order can't hold when the whole board is collapsing. John Vervaeke approaches the crisis through cognitive science. He naturalizes meaning by reconciling what he calls relevance realization with a scientific worldview. And then he cultivates practices like meditation, circling, and dialogos to bring that theory to life. I find this powerful and convincing. I have some differences. Vervaeke and I both share a historical critique, but where he points to history of ideas, I tend to emphasize more the loss of the material commonality. So while I think psychotechnologies like meditation or structured conversations can help with the problem of meaning, I don't think they address the material forces that are shaping and restructuring the game board underneath our feet. Then there's Brian Johnson's don't die approach. As AGI approaches, don't die could become a common floor. Sleep, health, longevity, self-care over grind culture. I agree completely. But survival is not a telos. If computation keeps building more elaborate cages for us, don't die risks becoming endurance without meaning. Alignment must include human meaning cultivation, not just survival. And then there's religion and ideology. In times of chaos, collective myth can supply ritual, solidarity, and action at scale. I spent a decade in a high control group. I understand the allure. But the same forces that bind can capture authoritarianism, scapegoating, dependency on the leader or the organization. We need belonging without the cage. There's value in all of these, even the religious and political responses, so long as they're not doing harm. But each is limited in a predictable way. And that limitation isn't accidental. It follows from the fact that the game itself is fractured. By the way, if you're enjoying this video and you want to go deeper into the subject matter, consider supporting me on Patreon. The videos just skim the surface, but each month there's going to be content on the Patreon that goes deeper. If that's something you want to participate in, there's a link down in the description for this video. No answer is complete in itself. Peterson is valuable. I've gotten some value from his insight myself. The problem is that he thinks it's safe to focus on yourself and the people closest to you and to just leave the world to the wise experts. That may have worked in the 1950s and 60s when institutions were stable, but we can't afford to wait until our houses are in perfect order before turning and facing the world. Plenty of flawed people have made history better. Today, our problems are collective, and they require collective solutions. John Vervaeke's work is fantastic. I have taken a lot from his Meaning Crisis series. Sometimes, though, he gives the impression that good practices grounded in solid science are enough to address the problem. But historical forces have made a universal resolution impossible. His history of ideas is brilliant, but it needs the history of institutions, economies, and technologies. The forces that shape and shatter both the players and the boards. Brian Johnson is right that Don't Die has near universal appeal. I appreciate his opposition to grind culture and his sacred regard for rest. But even if survival is valuable, we still face the problem of what makes a life worthwhile, especially in the shadow of computation and AGI. There are fates worse than death, and endurance without meaning is one of them. Religious and political responses can be valuable when they face the world without coercion. But the danger is in conflation. When politics disguises itself as religion, and when religion drapes itself in political myth. Either way, the pageantry turns toxic. Each of these answers offers something real, but it's incomplete. And that incompleteness is not an accident. It's the inevitable result of trying to play on fractured boards with broken rules. So what's the answer? Pick a little from each pile? Throw our hands up in the air? I'm not selling an answer because I don't think there is one. What I'll offer instead is a way to step back and to think about what might be a good answer for you wherever you find yourself. Imagine your life is like a business. And don't worry, I'm not offering you a free market solution to your life's problems. It's just an analogy. Your life is like a business and your currency is time, attention, and energy. Scarce resources for all of us. The question is, how should you spend it? Especially when people are trying to sell you solutions. If you chase pure efficiency, that would mean streamlining your life for what is most effective right now. That can work until the world shifts. Efficiency assumes stable conditions, but in reality, tomorrow's world will not be the world today. Our parents and grandparents learned a skill, got a job, maybe prospered in it, possibly even died in it. That's a function of a coherent social order with stable niches. For better or for worse, that's not the world we live in today. You can't acquire a final set of skills or knowledge that sets you up for life. And I'm not only talking about the job market, I'm just using that as an example. The same logic applies to community, intimate relationships, and even self-identity. The opposite of efficiency is slack, redundancy, extra capacity, but also the ability to reconfigure yourself. That's what resiliency gives you. The ability to encounter novelty, repair damage, and pivot to opportunity. We always need some slack in the system because no matter what path we commit ourselves to, and no matter how skillful we become, we're going to generate errors and make mistakes. Resiliency ensures we have enough extra lying around to make up for those mistakes. That applies in business, community building, intimate relationships, physical health, you name it. Think of efficiency as a selective constraint. It narrows you down. Resilience is an enabling constraint. It keeps possibilities open. These are opponent processes, like your sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous systems. Optimization isn't about picking one over the other, it's about balancing both. This allows you to fit into niches and move laterally between them as conditions are changing. And just as there's no universal rule about how aroused you should be, there's also no rule about how efficient or how resilient you should be. It depends upon the relationship between you and your environment, and both are changing. You can see this principle dramatized in the show Game of Thrones. Characters who clung rigidly to their expectations usually died. The ones who endured were usually the ones who could pivot, abandoning plans, adapting strategies, responding flexibly as conditions changed. And the conditions were constantly changing. The political landscape shifted from one season to the next. But more deeply, the rules of reality were in flux. Magic was returning. The dead were rising. The game board was constantly mutating. That's a perfect analogy for our moment. We're not facing literal sorcery or zombies, but we are facing accelerating climate change, political collapse, rising authoritarianism, global pandemics, and the possible birth of AGI. It's not just pieces moving around the board itself is shifting and changing under our feet. There's no universal ratio of efficiency to resiliency. But when novelty is increasing, it's probably a safer bet to lean toward resilience, because resilience is exactly what allows us to face the unprecedented. Resilience has many dimensions depending upon the context. Morally, it means remain flexible, but don't become a monster. Don't be Ned Stark, too rigid to survive. Also, don't be Ramsay Bolton. Tyrion Lannister would be a better model, right? He's flexible and pragmatic, but there are certain lines he won't cross. From a physiological perspective, it means don't die stupidly. Train broadly, not just in one narrow direction. Don't be a rigid killing machine like the Mountain. Be more like Arya Stark. She trained across disciplines, swordplay, stealth, languages, and it saved her. Huge biceps are great, but it might be more useful if you can run, jump, and throw. Relationally, it can mean a lot of things. Breaking old patterns, learning to work fluidly with trade-offs between reason and emotion, developing good communication, good negotiation skills, developing your leadership skills. Robb Stark trusted too rigidly in the way things had been done up until that point. He couldn't pivot, and it cost him his life. Jon Snow, by contrast, forged fragile but ultimately genuine bonds across the Night's Watch, with the Wildlings, even with Daenerys. That relational resilience was partly responsible for keeping him alive. Rhythmically, balance, work, and rest, labor, and play. Burnout is the surest way to lose before the real battle. Think here of Stannis Baratheon, consumed by endless labor and grim duty until he collapsed. Contrast that with Bronn, who knew when to fight and also who knew when to feast. And somehow he always managed to live to fight another day. Resilience isn't one skill. It's the meta skill of staying alive, adaptive, and human when the game itself is changing. No single answer will save us. Not Peterson's order versus chaos, not Vervaeke's ecology of practices, not Brian Johnson's don't die, and no particular myth or legend. Each might have value, but none on its own is enough. What we can cultivate is resilience, the capacity to endure, adapt, and to stay human as the ground shifts under our feet. That's what keeps us in the game long enough to face what's coming. Winter is coming, the board will shift, the rules will change. The only question is, will you be ready to play?